Hello and welcome to the first part, or this new series that I'm going to run where we're going to sort of create famous characters from TV, movies, games, things like that. The first one we're going to do is Harry Potter. Me and my kids have been watching it recently, so they asked me if I could make it as a character, got me thinking, and so we're going to have a go. Now, initially I thought we'd make a base mesh in Blender and just use that for all the animations, because this series is really going to be focusing on how to create animations, how to get those into Engine, and then how to set that up so you can make your own custom characters. But I thought we'd cut out the process of making a mesh, and I've gone onto a website called Model Resource. I've searched in here for Harry Potter, and I have grabbed myself this Harry Potter model. There are others. And if you wish, you can grab one of these, take it into Blender, rig it, and then you'll be able to follow along. But I have actually taken this one, rigged it in preparation, and we're going to use this character model as our character model. Okay, so in the project files below the video, you will see a Blender file, and that will have just the rigged character. And you'll also see an FBX with all the animations that we're going to make in the series over the course of the video series. So if you are not interested in making the animations and just want to set things up in the engine, then you can go and do that. But the videos themselves will be covering animation and all the engine stuff sort of intermingled. So it might be best to just go through the whole series. Now, this series is aimed at sort of intermediate users. It will be quite beginner friendly. I will be going over things, but really you should have a basic understanding of Unreal and blueprints and a basic understanding of Blender, because that's the modeling and animation software we're going to use. So in preparation, like I said, I've already rigged this. In one of the series, we will go over the rigging process. But for now, I just wanted to get started straight away. So before we start doing the animations in preparation, because in this video we're going to be making the idle animation and then importing that model into Unreal. So I'm just going to start a new project. So I want a game. I want a third-person template. I want to just leave this as is. Want to start with get the starter content, and then I'm just going to call this Harry Potter for tutorial, and then I'm going to hit create project, and that's going to take a little while because my computer's rubbish. And while that's happening, we're going to move over to Blender and we're going to start creating our animations using this model that we've got. Okay, so like I say, just open up there. I think it's called Harry. Yeah, it's just called Harry rigged. Okay, so this is the file that you'll get in the description below, and you just need to click on that or drag it into Blender, or just use file and open, and then you'll get this, and it'll be fully rigged. The model is in separate pieces. We'll go over that when we go over the exporting stuff. But for now, we want to jump straight in with animation. Now, if you've never done animation in Blender, it's really easy. We can do it anywhere from any of these tabs, really, but there is an animation tab set up, and you may not have this window here when you set this up. So all you need to do is come over here, wait till you see this crosshair, and then drag out a window, left click and drag, and then here, set it to the dope sheet, okay? And then when you've got it set to dope sheet, it'll be set up like this. Set this to action editor. Okay, that's really important for later. Well, for now as well. But this is where we're essentially going to be creating all of our different animations. If we hit new up here, okay, and then this is going to record an action, and we're going to call this idle. And then we're going to click this little shield here to make sure that everything we do gets saved. Okay, so that's just a little bit of setup for the animation. Now I'll just go over the different windows. Now we've set this up here, what I like to do is go back to a 3D viewport so I can have a view of the character without all the bones and the transparency showing. We're going to do the actual manipulation of the character in this window. Okay, so if we want to, in order to get that set up to get started, what you must do is click on the armature. You can see up here, if you're finding it difficult to select here, you can just select where it says Hare, and that's the armature. And then up here where it says object, we can just switch over to pose mode, and now we can pose our character. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now down here is our timeline, and this is where we put our keyframes and where we can do like splines to join up the keyframes. Now we aren't going to be looking too much at the graph editor. In fact, we're not going to look at it all in this first series. We're just going to focus on keyframes, and we're going to build up each series. We're going to introduce levels of complexity to do with not only with the animations, but how we blend those animations in Unreal, and how we can use different ways of using the state machines in Unreal and caching off poses. And if you don't know what that means, it will all make sense as we go through. But this one is essentially going to be the simplest way we can do it from scratch. So we've just got to imagine we've made this model. I have made the rig, so it isn't like professional level rig, but it'll certainly work for what we want. Okay, so without further ado, the first thing we're going to do is the idle pose. Now, everything is going to start at the idle pose. So it's a really important pose to get right, but we aren't going to spend too long on it because in this 15-minute video, we want to get an idle pose, animate it, and then export it into Unreal. Okay, that's the as far as we want to get today. So first thing I'm going to do is come down here. Now we can set our start and our end of our animation. So we want start to be on 1. For this, I'm going to set the end to 90. I'm going to come up here to this output properties, and I'm going to set the frame rate to be 30. Okay, that's important because we want it to be 30 frames a second. So this is a second and a half. Right, so I have already selected these frames, these bones. So just left click and drag over all the bones, and then hit I on your keyboard, and then we want to put in the location and rotation. Now, some people, when they're animating, press this button down here, and what this does is auto key. So if you come over here, make a change, it will automatically update that change. Now, I don't use that because 2 reasons. I find it much better to just lock in the keyframes by selecting the bones that I want, hitting I and doing that. I find that better. But also, it when you use this, the automatic keyframe, it actually doesn't lock in your keyframes. It sort of does it on a spline, so your animation can actually get a little bit messed up. So it's good practice, especially when you're just doing it this early on. And if you've never done animation before, definitely don't put this on. Just remember that every time you're happy with your keyframe, you lock in that position. Okay, but I'm going to remind you as we go along. Right, so with an idle pose, so there's 2 different kinds of animation really for games. There are looping animations and animation that consists of 3 or 4 basic actions. We're going to go over the action-based ones in the next video, but today we're going to be going over a very basic loop. Now, a loop, as you can imagine, wants to start and end on the same frame. So to get this basic idle animation set up, first we need to pose it, and then we're going to copy that pose and put it at the end. Right, so very, very quickly, I'm going to go ahead and pose this idle animation. So really, you want to go get some reference, okay? You want to go online and get like a reference pose for somebody just standing there. But because we are in a little bit of a rush, we haven't got too much time, I'm just going to bring him into sort of a natural pose. I'm going to have one foot slightly in front of the other. Now, one thing I need to go over is manipulating the mesh, and I should just do that before we go into the pose. Now, the feet have something called IK on them, okay? So that means inverse kinematics, which means that if I grab this foot, it controls the entire leg, okay? And conversely, if I grab the pelvis and bring it down, that controls the legs as well, okay? So there's like a chain of bones here that are being controlled by this motion and this motion. Also, the knees you might find get a little bit out of whack. So you might find that you bring the foot really forward and then the knee is a little bit off. So we have these knee controllers, okay, They're called pole targets. So if you want to control the direction of your knee, you can just move these, okay? And everything else, so these all deal with movement. So you can press G to grab to do that. G to grab, okay? And also if you want to rotate the foot, you can click on this IK controller at the back and hit R, and that will also rotate the foot. Now, do you see how that's actually moving the cloth here as well? That's because I haven't weight painted this. So there is a thing called weight painting, if you don't know, where you can control the amount of influence a bone has on each object. But for speed, I have not weight painted this at all. So if you know how to do that, you can go in and do all that and make this a lot cleaner, but it's not really going to matter for what we're doing. Now, if you are playing around with stuff and you get into a bit of a muddle and you want to get back to where you were, you can just hold down Alt and hit G, and that's going to get rid of all the grabs, all the movements, and Alt R is going to get rid of all the rotation. So now we're back to our default sort of A pose. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and quickly pose this character out a little bit, right? So we're having stood up straight. So his legs want to be slightly closer together, but one wants to be slightly in front of the other, and the feet don't want to be completely pointing forward. We want to have a slight rotation on them like this. Also might just move the knee out slightly on this one. Just bring the arms, no, we have to do these one at a time, down slightly so they're in a more of a natural sort of resting pose by his side. You might have to move around the model to get this manipulation tool to work. They're a bit jittery. You can hold down shift if they're moving a little bit too much. Let's have a look at that. Like I say, we don't want, this is just the idle pose, so it doesn't have to be too dramatic. In fact, we don't want it to be dramatic. We just want it to be quite a plain sort of basic pose, because this is the pose that everything's going to come from. It don't want to be overly dramatic, unless of course you're going for that sort of fight pose, then it does want to be more dramatic. But this is him just standing, chilling. Now he's going to have a wand in his hand, so we want to curl up these fingers. Now I find it difficult to rig fingers, so they're not the greatest, but they're not too bad. Okay, so I'm just going to grab these and just, so that it'll make sense when he's got the wand in his hand. Bring the thumb down a little. And you see how it's moving the sleeve. Ideally, we wouldn't want that, but it's okay. All right. And this other hand, I'm just going to pose it so that the back two fingers are sort of coming inwards like that. Or is it outwards? Yeah, outwards a little bit, like that. Just so they're not perfectly lined up, I'm going to put a bend on that end one. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Okay, cool. So that's going to be our initial pose. Now what we're going to do is we're going to drag over and we're going to hit I, location and rotation. That's going to lock all that in. Now we're going to come down here and we're going to make sure that our keyframes are selected by clicking them, and they're orange, right? So that means they're selected. Hit Shift D to duplicate, drag that over to 90. Bring this, now some people would put this at 45, but what we're going to do here is sort of breathing. This is breathing action. Now we're going to do this super simply. So this is, the simplest way you can do it. Now actually you breathe in a little slower than you breathe out. So I'm going to place this at about 50. You could place it at 60 if you wanted to exaggerate it even more. And then simply all I'm going to do is I'm going to select this bone, make sure my marker here is on 50. Grab the middle bone. I'm going to pull up. Okay, that's just going to bring his legs up a little bit. Then I'm going to grab the chest. I'm going to rotate it back as if he's breathing. I'm going to grab both arms and I'm just going to pull them back slightly like that. Okay, then I'm going to select everything, hit I, location, rotation, hit play, and there you go. Idle animation. You're done. Okay, so let's just check the time. I'm using this free recorder, and I've only got 15 minutes per video. So let's check the time. Okay, right. So actually, I think we're going to have to end that there. And in the next video, we'll go ahead and we'll import this and we'll do a walk animation as well. Okay, so that's the first video. I'll wrap it up there and I'll see you in the next one.